Ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you something, brother.
It's Talk Wrestling Live with Felix The Cat Katlovski
and Gemini Joe.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
We heard rumbling. No, we heard rumors. Homicide. Conan. 5150 at LAX.
Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
And follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm in no mood for your wisecrack. Let's get it on.
And this is Felix The Cat Katlovski on Talk Wrestling Live. You're listening to NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you. And we got a lot of news to get started today.
So thanks for joining us on Talk Wrestling Live on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you. And tonight, we'll be talking about Impact Wrestling Fear After Dark, and here's some of the matches that we'll be talking about. We know that Killer Kross and Moose, they teamed up against Johnny Impact and Brian Cage. We also know that the Lucha Bros and Taurus, they took on LAX and Daga. And then we also know that Dark Alley and Su Yung, they took on Kiera Hogan and Jordan Grace. And finally, we will be talking about the Rascals taking on Eli Drake and Eddie Edwards. And after we talk about Impact Wrestling on Fear After Dark, we'll be talking a little bit about MLW Super Fight and this show that they had over the weekend. So we'll be talking more about that during Fear After Dark.
So without further ado, let's get started with Fear After Dark.
Are you scared? It's time for Fear After Dark.
I thought this was fun and games.
Here's a funny thing.
Encelo! Miedo!
Fear. It was meant for the art of survival. I am the new beginning.
Yes, we are for Ohio. By Ohio, because we are Ohio versus everything.
I'm better than every single one in that locker room. Tessa Blanchard is undeniable.
I'm not a man. I'm a machine.
So Impact Wrestling for February 1st, it started out with the Lucha Bros, that's Phoenix and Pentagon Jr., as well as Taurus taking on LAX, that's Santana and Ortiz, along with Daga. Now, we know about LAX and the Lucha Bros pretty well, but this was the first time that we really seen Daga and Taurus in Impact Wrestling. I've mentioned I previously saw Daga back in Lucha Underground, but I think this was the first time that I've really seen Taurus. Taurus, he's this high flyer, he's like a luchador, but he also has a lot of power and strength that he contributes to in his team. And he also dresses in this bull mask with these horns. It's a pretty unique look. Now, we know there's been some slight beef with LAX and the Lucha Bros, but there's still some respect between the two teams, because at the start of the match, we saw a handshake being accepted by Santana and Pentagon. So they're still on the same page with that. Now, LAX and the Lucha Bros, they're used to teaming, but with the additions of Taurus and Daga, you have some miscommunication. I mean, at one point, you had Pentagon, he sent Daga to the outside of the ring, and it caused Santana to dropkick Ortiz, his own tag team partner, on LAX. And then earlier in the match, we also saw that power from Taurus I mentioned when he applied this flapjack-like move on Daga, just tossing him up in the air like it's just pizza dough, and followed by a dropkick into the corner. Now, it looked like the Lucha Bros were heading towards a victory when they went for this double super kick on Ortiz, and even Taurus helped out as he applied a spinning Michinoku driver. But it wasn't over yet, as he could only get a 2 count. And in the end, it was Pentagon that got that tag in, and the Lucha Bros showed great teamwork, hitting that Fear Factor pile driver with a 3 count victory. So your winners in that match were the Lucha Bros. But after the match, it was a great victory for the Lucha Bros and Taurus. And after that match, you saw business pick up. That's when Pentagon got a microphone, and this instantly sent out LAX's leader, Conan, to the ring. Pentagon was pretty much telling LAX that they shouldn't have been so cocky at Homecoming, because the most recent Impact Wrestling pay-per-view in Nashville, Tennessee. And because now the Lucha Bros picked up the win over LAX and Daga, and it's not over yet, because the Lucha Bros, well, now they want another title shot for the Impact Tag Team Championships against LAX. And Pentagon mentioned that they had such a great match last time, so now they want to do it again. So we learned that LAX and Lucha Bros will face off again this week, as LAX held up their championship gold in the faces of the Lucha Bros. And then we next saw Moose and Killer Kross. They were backstage Killer Kross let us know that he wasn't very excited for tonight for the show because the previous week you had Brian Cage. He was stuck at the airport with customs and border security, and somehow he later managed to get to the show. And Brian Cage, he got involved in Killer Kross's match. Kross, he reminded Brian Cage that the machine is not invincible, and that he'll pay for what he did. Now, we saw Moose try to get Kross to relax, but he still had a similar message for Brian Cage and Johnny Impact for later in the show. And after they got done with Brian Cage and Impact, Moose and Killer Kross, they were planning on celebrating. So we saw Conan backstage, and he was complimenting LAX on how great their match was with the Lucha Bros earlier in the night, despite the fact that LAX lost that match. Now, Conan, on behalf of LAX, he accepted that challenge by the Lucha Bros for LAX. And since he's the leader of LAX, he told them to have a great match and not to get carried away. He doesn't want that beef. Conan always wants these teams to have great matches, but not to take it overboard where there's beef. So he wants LAX to keep it calm and to retain their championship gold. And up next, we saw Su Yung and Dark Alley. They were teaming against Jordynne Grace and Kiera Hogan. Now, there's a lot of strange things that have been happening between these two teams in the past, especially with the involvement of Rosemary. Last time you had Rosemary, she even said that Jordynne Grace and Kiera weren't safe from the darkness and that it wasn't their fight. But on this episode, we saw Rosemary, she got involved yet again. When the lights went out, you had Su Yung, she just disappeared. And this was a really strange transformation because at first Su Yung was at the top rope, and then the lights go out, and when they came back on, you had Rosemary standing in the exact same spot in her place, and everybody was wondering where Su Yung went. This distraction, it gave Kiera Hogan the advantage because she managed to get that tag in, and she managed to close out the match with a victory after applying this spinning fisherman's hook neckbreaker and a pinfall. So, of course, your winners in that match was Kiera Hogan and Jordynne Grace. But after the match, once again, Rosemary, she just disappeared, leaving Kiera and Jordynne stunned. I mean, they won their match, but they looked confused. I mean, will you want to celebrate when somebody just appears and disappears out of thin air like that? So we saw Scarlett Bordeaux. She was training for her upcoming in-ring debut for Impact Wrestling. We saw her personal trainer, Bobo. He was getting his feet wet sitting at poolside. Scarlett wasn't really happy to see Bobo just playing in the pool like that. He's her personal trainer. She's busy training hard. She wanted to put him to work, so she decided, hey, we're going to spar. Kind of like when you see an MMA fighter, he's training with his or her personal trainer, and they're just sparring like that. Now, Bobo, he isn't great at taking shots because Scarlett, she began delivering all these kicks, just kick after kick, and it sent Bobo soaking wet, falling into the pool. And Scarlett, she added some, I guess, sexual innuendo, telling Bobo that he got her all wet. But then again, he made a big splash when he fell into the pool, so maybe Scarlett wasn't very happy that now she was the one soaking wet. So Eli Drake and Eddie Edwards, they were tag teaming against the Rascals. That's Zachary Wentz and Desmond Xavier. Now, if you've been following the actions of Eli Drake and Eddie Edwards, you'll notice how Eli Drake, he's been trying to change Eddie Edwards, trying to take Eddie back to his old self. I mean, Eddie used to be one of the greatest tag teams in Impact Wrestling as part of the American Wolves with Davey Richards. We haven't really seen Davey Richards in Impact Wrestling anymore. He's not there anymore. But Eddie then at one point became the Impact World Champion, and he was holding the most prestigious gold that you can hold in Impact Wrestling. That's the Impact Championship. And at some point, he just got carried away. He went crazy. He got kicked out of his house by his wife, and he was committed to this mental institution with the help of his own wife as well. So you had Eddie Edwards. He would eventually make his way out, thanks to Raven, out of that mental institution, Shady Acres. But Raven told him he wasn't going crazy enough. He didn't go far enough. That's what Raven was saying. And Eddie continued to talk to this kendo stick. He even named it. He named it Kenny. And we often saw Eddie bringing Kenny, the kendo stick, into his matches. He would bring these hardcore elements to his matches with that kendo stick, Kenny, like I mentioned. But Eli Drake, he just tried to keep on getting Eddie to stop it with that kendo stick. Now, they have to coexist. They have a tag team match, and you really have to wonder what Eli really wants from Eddie Edwards, because when Eli wants something, it's usually about something that benefits Eli himself. So I've mentioned before that I have to question Eli's actions, because you have Eli telling Eddie not to use that kendo stick, and to get away from this wrestling hardcore style, maybe to make Eddie more predictable and less unhinged. But what's in it for Eli? I mean, after all his requests not to use that kendo stick in his match, Eli Drake is the one ending up using that kendo stick, and he uses it on Xavier, followed by that gravy train. That's Eli Drake's finisher, and Eli managed to get the 3-count victory. So Eli really seems like a hypocrite right here. I mean, yeah, he won the match with Eddie Edwards, but Eddie Edwards, he began arguing with Eli. It didn't really bother Eli Drake, though, as he seemed proud of what he did. I mean, that's Eli Drake telling Eddie Edwards not to use that kendo stick, and you end up having Eli Drake using that kendo stick. So what's going on here? I mean, well, Eddie Edwards was pretty confused about that. Now, we saw a replay from weeks ago when Tessa Blanchard, she got suspended for Impact Wrestling for attacking a backstage worker and Gail Kim. Now, we saw a video of Tessa Blanchard. She was gloating on Twitter where Tessa told Taya that she would never be champion if it wasn't for Gail Kim. And we last saw Gail Kim as the special guest referee at that homecoming match that Tessa Blanchard blames Gail Kim because this caused Tessa to challenge Taya to a rematch on the February 15th Impact Wrestling TV special, Uncaged. We then saw a recap video between the controversy surrounding Rich Swann and Sami Callihan. You have Rich Swann, he's admitting that what Sami Callihan has been saying is true. Callihan took Rich Swann under his wing when Swann had no place to go. I mean, Swann was homeless, and Callihan helped Rich Swann's family out. So Sami is responsible for getting Swann into wrestling, and Swann has a special place for Sami in his heart. That's Sami Callihan. But Swann then says that Callahan's demands on him is not something that family does. So, I mean, there's definitely controversy right there. I mean, he's saying that Callihan took Rich Swann under his wing, but then he has all these physical demands on Rich Swann, and he's saying that that's not something that family does. So maybe he's taking it too far. Now we go backstage again, and this time you have Taya Valkyrie, that's the Knockouts champion, and she has some words for Tessa Blanchard. Taya, she accepted that rematch for the February 15th Uncaged TV special, and she mentioned that the rematch could have happened sooner if it wasn't for Tessa getting herself suspended. Now, Taya ended up calling Tessa a broken diamond, and that definitely probably got in the head of Tessa Blanchard, who's probably sitting at home watching all this. You have Fallah Bahh. He took on Psycho Clown. We saw Psycho Clown a few times in Impact Wrestling in the past. This is a pretty quick match. I mean, you had some good comedy between Psycho Clown and Fallah Bahh as the two men locked up. You had Fallah Bahh doing his no gesture, that hand gesture, and it got some laughs. But later in the match, we saw Psycho Clown. He went for that insane somersault senton splash to the outside. And earlier in that match, we saw Fallah Bahh try to go for Psycho's mask. It was unsuccessful, though. He didn't get to rip it off or anything. But towards the end of the match, you had Fallah Bahh. He managed to get Psycho Clown caught off guard, and Fallah Bahh hit that belly-to-belly suplex from the top rope. Bahh even went for that bonsai drop we kind of seen Rikishi do back in the day. But Psycho Clown, he managed to get up before Bahh could hit that move. And Fallah Bahh, he's pretty resilient still as he managed to trip Psycho Clown, but Bahh was going for that splash, and Psycho Clown hit that small package pin for the win. So Fallah Bahh, he couldn't really manage to take control of this matchup. So Psycho Clown is the winner of that match. And we went backstage again, and you had Brian Cage. He was confronting Johnny Impact. Brian Cage says that he'll be looking out for Johnny Impact, and that he wants to have his back to keep him fresh and healthy for their match for the Impact World title. That's going to be at Impact Wrestling's TV special Uncaged on February 15th, as I mentioned. And Johnny told Brian Cage not to screw him over in their match for that night, but it was Brian Cage that responded that that's Johnny Impact's department. He's the champion after all. So it was Johnny Impact and Brian Cage. They were teaming against Moose and Killer Kross. And for most of it, it looked like Johnny Impact and Brian Cage remained on the same page throughout the match. But it wasn't until that miscommunication between that team took place. You had Johnny Impact going at it with Killer Kross as Johnny went for that 619 on Kross, and it sent Kross into Brian Cage, and this didn't make Brian Cage too happy, but it didn't end there. I mean, you had more miscommunication when Johnny went for that springboard kick, and instead he hit his own partner again, Brian Cage, right in the face. And that's when you can tell that neither man was really on that same page, because Cage tried to attack Johnny Impact with the discus clothesline, and instead he hit Killer Kross. Now, it could have been a great accidental move, still showing some kind of teamwork, if it wasn't for Brian Cage pretty much saying, "Screw you guys, I'm going home," just like in an episode of South Park. As Brian Cage did nothing, absolutely nothing to help his partner Johnny Impact getting speared by their opponent Moose. Moose then got the 3 count on Johnny Impact for that win, and Brian Cage couldn't care less. I mean, he just stood there watching. So your winners, Moose and Killer Kross. Now after the match, you had Moose and Killer Kross. They began celebrating their victory, closing out the show. And we'll be talking more about Impact Wrestling because they did have a special over the weekend. It was with Smash Wrestling out of Canada. It was a special on Twitch, so if you have a computer, if you have the internet, if you have a smartphone, if you know how to use the internet, it's just technology, don't be afraid of it. If you know how to do that, you could watch it for free. It's still up there on archive. Check the past broadcast section on Impact Wrestling's channel on Twitch. They don't usually archive their weekly TV show, but they do archive these Twitch specials, so you could still watch that. Now, we saw in a 3-way match, it was Kevin Bendel. He defeated Carter Mason and Sebastian Suave. Then we saw in a 4-way match, we saw Rosemary. She defeated Allie, Casey Spinelli, and Zandra Bale. Then we saw Mike Rollins. He defeated Cody Deaner. We also saw Mark Wheeler. He defeated Kyle Boone. And then we saw in a tag team match for the Smash Tag Team titles, there was a title change as Idris Abraham and Joe Coleman, they defeated Brent Banks, the champion, along with Tyson Dux, his tag team partner, also the champion. We also saw Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz, that's the Rascals. They defeated Dave and Jake Christ, that's OVE. We also saw Tarek, the champion of the Smash Wrestling title. He defeated Scotty O'Shea. And then you had Johnny Impact, the champion of Impact Wrestling World title. He defended his title against Sami Callihan, and Johnny Impact won that match. So that was what happened at Brace for Impact, that special between Impact Wrestling and Smash Wrestling that happened on Saturday, February 2nd over the weekend. And there was another special that we saw over the weekend. It was MLW Super Fight. It took place that very same night on February 2nd, Saturday night. We saw the Hart Foundation. They were taking on the Lucha Bros for the MLW Tag Team Championships. You had the Hart Foundation. They won by pinfall to become the new MLW Tag Team Champions after the Hart Foundation hit that Doomsday Destroyer on Phoenix. Great teamwork maneuver right there. But after the match, later into the night, you had the Hart Foundation winning that match. They were celebrating with champagne backstage, but they were interrupted by MJF, and he was really sour that he lost his MLW middleweight championship to Teddy Hart earlier in the season when MJF was injured. So he wasn't 100%, and you got to be sour about that, but as the champion, you got to be prepared for these kind of things. So I guess MJF just wasn't prepared. So Teddy Hart, he said that they can have their rematch anytime, any place. But right now, the Hart Foundation was celebrating. So Teddy told MJF to simply get lost and join the Elite instead of interrupting their celebration. Then you had Cotto Brazil. He took on Ricky Martinez. And Ricky Martinez, he was able to win by pinfall. You had Martinez tapping out, but the ref didn't see it, because Selena De La Renta, she was distracting the referee, and later she managed to get pepper spray into the eyes of Cotto Brazil. So we received an update that Cotto Brazil was being seen by doctors. He was getting medical supervision right there. We learned that Mance Warner, the Southern Psycho, he's set to make his MLW debut soon, and that's somebody that we've seen in AIW, Absolute Intense Wrestling. It's a promotion here in Cleveland. So it's really cool to see Mance Warner getting his big break in MLW. We also saw a promo for the return of Jimmy Havoc, so he'll be coming back to the company in MLW. And then in the main event, we saw Low Ki taking on Tom Lawler for the MLW Heavyweight Championship. Now, Tom Lawler was able to win by referee stoppage to become the new MLW Heavyweight Champion. Now, how did this happen? Lawler, he applied a submission, but instead of Low Ki tapping out, he just passed out, and it caused the match to end. So you had Low Ki. He's been undefeated for 15 years in MLW, so an impressive win for Tom Lawler, the new MLW Heavyweight Champion. Now, over the weekend, we learned that the Lucha Bros, they've signed with AEW All Elite Wrestling, as they were invited to wrestle there by Cody Rhodes. Now, Chris Jericho, he began stirring the pot on social media when he was hinting that their deal with the Lucha Bros, it was exclusive with AEW, All Elite Wrestling. But then we learned from Lucha Central that that's just not the case, because the Lucha Bros, they still have a deal with Impact Wrestling and AAA in Mexico, but the future at MLW is kind of uncertain, as MLW's Court Bauer wish them best of luck wherever they go next. So that does it for the Fear After Dark report. We'll be talking more about what's to come when we start the Lights Out report after these messages.
Ride the winds flying far and soaring like a hawk.
Run a marathon with the endurance of a tiger.
Swim across the ocean like a dolphin.
Beast Energy X. Do you have it in you?
Buy Beast Energy X at all Waffle Max locations and unleash the beast in you.
Join the Beast Energy X fan club and get free perks. Sign up by following us on Twitter at Beast Energy X.
Welcome back to Talk Wrestling Live.
Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show.
So you already heard me talking about Fear After Dark. We recapped everything that happened from the February 1st episode of Impact Wrestling, and we talked about the Impact Wrestling Twitch special with Smash Wrestling. We talked about MLW Super Fight. But now we're going to be talking about everything coming soon to Impact Wrestling on Lights Out. So let's get started with that.
Shut up, 5. A 10 is talking.
I'm surprised you're containing yourself. It's like looking at a work of art, John. Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived on Impact Wrestling. Oh my God.
They tell them to cover up. I will not be hot-shamed.
Talk about making an impact.
Make wrestling sexy again.
Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived. And now she's leaving, and it's, oh Lord.
Turn the lights down low, because it's time for Impact Lights Out.
So this is Impact Wrestling Lights Out, where we're talking everything coming soon to Impact Wrestling. And this week on Impact Wrestling on February 8th, we will see the Impact World Tag Team titles on the line when LAX, that's Ortiz and Santana, the champions, will be defending those titles against Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix the Lucha Bros. We also know that Puma King, he's not a regular to Impact Wrestling. We've seen him on AAA in Mexico. He'll be taking on Sami Callihan. And Sami Callihan from OVE, he recently took to Twitter and he said that somebody is going to have to call PETA, the Animal Protection Group, after he takes that cute kitty out, referring to Puma King. We also know that Dark Alley, she'll be taking on Kiera Hogan. There's a lot of beef between these two. They used to be best friends, and now they're not. They're bitter enemies. Then we know that Willie Mack, he'll be teaming with his tag team partner Rich Swann when they take on OVE, that's Jake and Dave Christ. Then, in next week's Impact Wrestling, on February 15th, it's going to be a TV special called Uncaged. We know that the Knockouts Championship, it's going to have a rematch between Taya Valkyrie, the champion, and Tessa Blanchard in a street fight. We saw Tessa Blanchard, she lost that title, the Knockouts Championship, to Valkyrie at Impact Homecoming pay-per-view after special guest referee Gail Kim got involved in the match. And after that, Tessa found herself suspended and unable to compete in Mexico after attacking Gail Kim and a backstage worker. And we also know that the Impact World Championship will be on the line when Johnny Impact, the champion, takes on Brian Cage. And we've seen how these two are not coexisting because there was a lot of miscommunication when they took on Moose and Killer Cross and they just started attacking each other. I mean, Brian Cage, he just literally watched his partner, Johnny Impact, getting speared by Moose, and he really couldn't care less. So these two are going to be facing off against each other at the February 15th Uncaged TV special show. And then we learned that Impact Wrestling, they announced their next pay-per-view. It's going to be called Rebellion on April 28th at the Rebel Entertainment Complex in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That's going to be an interesting event to see. The last pay-per-view was Homecoming, and this one's going to be called Rebellion. I believe Rebellion was the name of a pay-per-view for WWE back in, I think, the 2000s, like early 2000s. It was like just for the UK. And I guess it was also a movie for Sylvester Stallone, so that's interesting that they decided to name it Rebellion. But that's it for Lights Out for this week. Thanks for joining us, thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next week when we talk about more Impact Wrestling and we talk about WWE and whatever else is in the news. Hopefully Gemini Joe will be back and he'll have a lot to cover as well. So this is Talk Wrestling Live on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the Underground starts with you.
You've been listening to Talk Wrestling Live. Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
And follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
Goodbye, And good night, bad. Rest in peace.